And good afternoon from Cape Town in South Africa. I'm your host, Brigitte Lambanda. Welcome to the broadcast. I have got a special guest with me today. My guest today is Yazeed Kamaldien. And just by way of introduction, Yazeed is a multimedia journalist from Cape Town. He writes for a variety of media and has made his own independent documentary films. Yazeed presently freelances for various media and works for film production companies. So let me introduce Yazeed to you.
Hi there,
Yazeed,
hello.
welcome. Great to have you
Thank
today.
you. Thank you. It's great to be part of your broadcast.
You are actually my very first South African journalist on a broadcast. So
That's cool.
it's absolutely cool. Nice to speak to a journalist. Yazeed, with the Cape Town water crisis, how are things going with the reporting? I mean, I don't know about you, but I'd say the last 10 days has been pretty crazy in
It
terms
has
of
been.
reporting and the sheer volume of information out there. It can actually get a little bit overwhelming sometimes. I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah. So for me, the amount of information, that has been quite overwhelming at times because there's so much happening constantly. And, there are so many angles to the story and things are developing constantly. So keeping up to date with that at times feels overwhelming. But at the same time, it's also such an interesting story to be reporting on because it constantly develops and unfolds in front of you. And being in Cape Town, which is my home city where I was born, I'm actually just very fascinated by the story. I'm enjoying reporting on it actually, even though it's not always pleasant, the kind of stories going on and so on. Especially when you hear, of we are all genuinely concerned about this. This isn't like a light story. It's got quite a severe kind of like crisis element to it. But what I enjoy about it is that I'm really becoming so informed about so many issues in my city.
You made a very interesting statement there, and I have to agree with you. You know, I have covered some stories with people where day zero has arrived for them, and people share stories of hardships, real hardships. It's not just covering another story. It's people who struggle with something that's a very basic need, water. And I don't think that we have had such an intense relationship with water as we have now. I have seen how people suddenly are becoming more and more educated about water. We're aware of how much water we use on a daily basis. We didn't do that before. It's
No.
a completely new relationship. And it's an intense one. I don't know about you, but it almost becomes all consuming because you're constantly worried about how much water you're using, and with the tariffs have just gone up, you don't want to get caught with a nasty bill, so you're acutely aware of what you consume every minute of the day.
That's spot on. That's correct. I mean, for myself, last week, I was in a situation. So the city has started implementing water rationing. So this means, of course, the pressure of our taps are lowered, which means that you would get less water coming out of your taps. And I experienced this last week, and it felt like day zero had already arrived. So I don't live on the ground floor. I live in an apartment complex and I live on one of the higher floors. So the water pressure was low and the water couldn't reach through the pipes into my flat. And I basically had to take a bucket and go downstairs to get water from one of the outside taps at our flat, at our complex, because I needed water, of course, for just the basics. And that's when I realized, and I think we all are realizing that we've taken water for granted in our city. Yeah.
We absolutely have. You know, I had that experience a little while ago. My water was only off for the day, but you know that sinking feeling that you get when you open the tap and there's no water. You kind of just like, what? This cannot be happening to me. It's almost a surreal feeling.
Yeah.
Um, and then you real
Mhm.
yeah.
And I think also you begin to understand, how inconvenient it is not to have water.
And you realize how privileged we've been. Before we carry on with the conversation, I just want to acknowledge the people that are watching the broadcast. I've got a bit of a technical glitch, so I can't show the comments, but I want to acknowledge the people. There's Heather from California. She's a South African watching from there. There's Jacqueline from East London. There's Heather, she's in the US. There's B. Gamzu in Miami, and Sandra from Cape Town. So welcome everyone who's watching. So with
Hi,
all the
everybody.
noise, yes, welcome and thank you for joining the broadcast. Yazeed, with all the noise that's going on, we spoke a moment ago about the sheer volume of information that's available to us constantly every minute of the day. There's
Yeah.
constant tweets, there's constant updates on the news, all sorts of social media, and there's just lots of it.
Mhm.
How do you plan your coverage? What do you decide? How do you decide what to cover?
So the story itself dictates that in a way, the way things are developing. So water security is a big thing, right? So, for example, what is the city doing to ensure water security? And that is looking at, of course, the aquifer projects, the desalination projects. And then that's one of the angles that I've been following. So last week I had a story in the newspaper, the Week in August newspaper, around the desalination projects. This week, of course, I'm going to be looking at the water story again. The story is evolving, and for me, it's important to keep track of what's happening at a level, of water security. There's also a lot of other stuff that's coming up. So I've written also about the plastic bottles, because a lot of people now are buying bottled water, but then what are we going to do with all the plastic? So that was an important story to write as well. I've written about the springs. There's been some information on the internet about the amount of springs that are available in Cape Town, but the fact of the matter is that not all of the springs are clean. So people will be rushing off the springs to get water, but we need to be thinking about whether or not that water is clean because the water is not being tested. Most of the spring water is not being tested. So, it's very important for us, for me at least, to look at what's happening in the public space and what's happening in society and to track that and inform the public, so people can make better decisions. So the spring story came up because everybody was talking about the springs and I had to make sure that I wrote a story in response to that. Then the desalination projects are on the go, so I needed to inform the public about that as well. The other thing for me is going forward, the big story is just water security. What is the long-term plan for Cape Town? These are questions that we need to be asking as citizens, and that informs the kind of journalism that I do around water stories.
It's a very interesting space to be because it's not just the water crisis is not just something that you and I are reporting on. It's something that we are very personally affected by. So it's a very personal story. It's not something that we can distance ourselves physically or emotionally from. Um,
Yeah.
and therefore one does have a responsibility to engage in responsible journalism.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Absolutely. Yeah.
because you want to be informative without getting personal. It's a dangerous ground to tread on because especially if we look at what's happening with our politicians, there's this constant treading on each other's toes. Um, and of course, the one thing that one needs to be careful of is not creating panic, because the one thing that's going to be the downfall of our society here in Cape Town is mass hysteria or mass panic. And I don't know how you feel about it, but I think journalism plays a very, very large role in keeping things calm and not fueling things, because calm is what's going to help us cope here.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of fear and a lot of panic, and that's understandable, right? Because obviously, water is such a part of every day of our lives. And I think the fear that people have been showing is indicative, just or the panic that's becoming coming on, like that we've been seeing, is also indicative of the kind of information that they're basing these decisions on. So a lot of people will be getting false information even, or a lot of people will be hearing somebody said something on Facebook, and the next thing you know is they go out and they, like make a decision based on false information. So for me, it's very important to sift through a lot of that information, verify it with, the relevant authorities, whether it's the City of Cape Town, environmentalists, etc., and then put that out into the public because a lot of the information hasn't been verified. We're also seeing a lot of fear buying, panic buying. People are going out buying more water, more buckets, this, that, the other, all these water-related products suddenly becoming more available. But how much of that is based on informed decisions?
And there's so much, you 100% right. There's just so much information out there, and it's hard to decide what to give priority to. But in terms of water security, you're 100% right, and it's not just about now. We have got a huge, daunting task ahead of us, which is unknown, because day zero, for example, it's not just a singular day. It's going to be a period of time, and it's an unknown period of time. It could be 3 months, it could be 6 months, it could be a year. Nobody knows exactly because there's no textbook for this.
And I mean, obviously, we've seen the unfortunate thing of, the drought has been coming on for a few years now in Cape Town. So this is already showing us, giving us an indication, that we might still be sitting for quite a while with this water shortage if the lower rainfall continues. And
Absolutely.
therefore, water security is so vital. Yeah.
And I think, people underestimate we have in the past underestimated the importance of water. We weren't acutely aware of how much water we were using, and how many aspects of our lives are touched by water. I mean, the inability, you may have forgotten how many times a day you wash your hands, for example.
Yeah.
Now you'd be counting that. And you'd be using alternative methods to try and sanitize your hands, And another big thing, I don't know if you've covered anything on it, but it's sanitation, our sewage system. What are we going to do about that? We may not have realized what a huge part of our lives that is, and the fact that it involves water.
Yeah, absolutely. And how much water it actually takes.
I know.
When you begin to, sorry.
I was speaking to a friend in the UK yesterday, I think, and she was saying that they use 6 liters of water to flush their toilets. I mean, who knew how much we used before? But the old systems used to use between 11 and 12 liters of water, and I think the newer ones now use 9 liters. But if you had to take that 9 liters, and bearing in mind that when day zero arrives, we have rations of 25 liters of water per person per day. 9 liters of your 25 liters allocation is quite a substantial amount.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the other thing about it is that is clean drinking water. That is water that we can actually drink, and it's just being wasted. If you know what I mean, like being wasted. And hopefully, this is something that these are habits of water saving that we can keep with us for the future. Because, once we begin to recycle regularly, hopefully we can do so in future as well. Then water isn't just flushed down without us reusing it, for example. Like, when like everybody's doing, taking a shower with a bucket and using that water for the flush, for flushing, or for plants, or for, you know, like whatever else people might be able to use it for, maybe even washing your car, I don't know, all kinds of things.
I think our relationship with water has changed forever. I don't think we'll ever go back to having the same kind of relationship we had with water previously.
I hope so. I hope so. We are human beings, and human beings are quite forgetful. So.
Yes, absolutely. Yazeed, thank you so much for your time.
It's a pleasure.
I see you've disappeared off screen right now. I'm not quite sure what's happened. We've had a bit of a technical glitch there. But for anyone wanting to get in touch with Yazeed, I'm going to post his contact details in the comments. But he is contactable on Twitter, and he's also contactable on Facebook, Skype, and Instagram. So I'm going to post all those contact details for Yazeed, and I want to say thank you very much for him for joining us today. So thanks everyone, thanks for joining us, and we'll be back soon with some more coverage. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Goodbye from me in Cape Town.